Hey everyone. So I apologize for not posting pretty recently. I actually got sick with COVID, and although it was pretty miserable for the few days that I had it, I can't imagine what it'd be like to go through the suffering through something like war. So as of right now, as I'm currently filming, there's this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. What I went through with my sickness was pretty bad, but I can't imagine and fathom to think about what everyday citizens would be going through in that time of crisis. I can't imagine living through that situation. So although I was feeling sick with COVID, at least I was like within my house. I had a hospital, I had things that could take care of me. But can you just imagine going through some sort of war zone and living through that, not having the right help, not even having food or shelter, just fearing for your life, maybe in bed, maybe I didn't have to work, but I was still within like a reasonable living environment. So in this video, I want to talk about what war does to the environment and to us in general, humans living in it. What will be its impact short-term and long-term? For the most part, it has some long-term effects that it will have on the environment and how it will impact the lives of the people for generations who are living in that area. So it's not just like the physical damage that the war will cause, but more of like a psychological event that will take place years after the war. So here's a perfect and sort of relatable story that I can share. It starts with the Vietnam War. And I want to talk about my parents' story instead, actually. So let's take a few steps back and talk about my parents. My mom's father, so my grandpa, he was in the military for South Vietnam. Obviously, it's sort of hard to hide that because like if you're in the military, you know whose side you're on. So the North Vietnamese captured and tortured him. So my mom's mother stayed behind and took care of him with what she could do. Now at that time, my mom was in high school. And at that time, at that age, she was planning to escape that war zone. So she and her siblings, they fled and escaped on a boat and made it to the Philippines. And from then on, the US, they sort of did their part to take care of them and help like the war refugees out, people who were able to escape. My dad, on the other hand, he came from a pretty poor family situation. So he lived in like the rural areas, living in like huts. He's very like indigenous to that area. He didn't have much going on anyway, so they didn't really care too much about him. Like because they're just like indigenous people, they're poor. They didn't really have much fame or infamy or just status to begin with, so they were left behind. But he was the only one of his siblings who sort of planned to escape. So basically he left by himself. I don't know the full details because they didn't really talk much about it, and I'm not sure if they are like comfortable to talk about it. I'm pretty sure if they wrote a book about it and about their experiences, it'd probably be more detailed. So anyway, that's where my parents came from. They're just war refugees escaping from Vietnam. They're just trying to escape that zone because like they had nothing to do with it. They're just normal civilians who want to live their life, but then now some conflicts arise, political conflicts, and they're just hitting the crossfire. They didn't have anything to do with starting the war. And so you can imagine like right now what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. It's unfair for regular civilians like you and I, who just happen to reside in that area, to have to deal with other political people's conflicts. They just wanted to live their peaceful life. So I'm just thinking here in America, here in the United States, I'm privileged where I don't have to go through any of that. I didn't have to stop my education or high school or college experience and have to literally fear dying. Alright, so with all that being said, now let's look at how the Vietnam War affected the environment in that area. So the most notable effect is when the United States, they started what's called Agent Orange. If you don't know what that is, here's a brief background about what Agent Orange is. So Vietnam was pretty densely populated with lots of vegetation and jungles that made fighting the war really difficult for the United States because everything is pretty much camouflaged. You have trees everywhere. So United States scientists, they developed some sort of herbicide to use against the environment and basically wipe out all the coverage and forestry and vegetation just to make fighting easier for them. They'd be able to expose the enemy much easier if there's like no coverage. So, all that sounds like a good strategy on paper. It's a good war tactic, but here's where the actual problem occurs. So these herbicides are very toxic to both the environment and to humans, and they didn't really know this yet. United States soldiers, they were told at the time that all these chemicals were harmless. It should only affect plants. That's what herbicides are for. They affect plants. But obviously today, now that we know, it's not true. So both the United States soldiers and the Vietnamese civilians, they were exposed to these chemicals and they developed horrible side effects later on in life. And these health effects varied from various types of cancers to birth defects. And you can actually even look up some of these pictures online, but be warned, these are pretty graphic pictures. and I don't want to post them just to scare people, so just do your due diligence and be warned that it is pretty graphic. So in the end, just know that these chemicals are pretty nasty. Dioxins, which are the most toxic chemicals used throughout this whole Agent Orange operation, have persisted in the environment for years. So short term, during the Vietnam War, these herbicides, they killed the trees. They did its job. So it was successful in at least what they wanted to achieve. But long term, after the war, that area that they used to spray that herbicide, it can't regrow anymore because of how persistent the chemical is. So regenerating the forest is practically impossible without having to excavate it and remove whatever residual chemicals were left over. So this affected the entire ecosystem and the food chain of Vietnam, or at least the area of whatever they exposed it to. But all is fair in love and war, right? So during the Vietnam War, Agent Orange was a practical strategy, and it might be justified, but right now the war is over. So why should today's people continue to live with the defects and the harmful environmental impacts from the result of a war that was 30, 50 years ago? So that means for generations today, the land is unusable for a reason that the children and the children's children won't even know or won't even remember. They didn't have to live through that event to have to even understand it, but the results still linger on. Again, these children today, they didn't start the war. They didn't live in the time frame of the war, so why should they be negatively impacted because of this war that happened years ago? I mean, that's just how I feel right now about what's happening with Russia and Ukraine right now. Currently there are families and children in the crossfire, so normal people like you and I, and they'll remember the day that they had to stop school in order to defend their home. 20 years from now, and obviously I hope this war doesn't last that long, 20 years from now the impact will still be there, both physically and psychologically for the people living in that area. 50 years from now, children from today may have children, but those children in the future should not be blamed or have to go through the impacts of what's happening today. It's just not fair. Again, they didn't start the war, they just lived their life, but then now they have to live through the results of the war. So that just means that when they're born, they're already at a negative disadvantage because they're living through the situation. And it's hard because I work on a military base. I work for the United States Air Force. I'm not dropping any bombs or anything. I don't want to hurt anyone. My job is definitely to help the environment. But because I work with the military, I'm sort of affiliated with what's happening right now. Because I'm working with them and affiliated with them, that I feel responsible and I feel like I'm dirtying up my hands because I'm part of this. Whatever they continue to do, no matter how many bomb shellings there are, I hope that maybe in the future that I can do my part just to fix that issue. Again, I'm not the one actively delivering weapons or pulling the trigger on anything. I want to be the one in the back helping people and the environment when they are getting affected after all this. But right now I can't do anything because I don't want to get hit in the crossfire either. So unfortunately, you just have to wait it out. In the end, war sucks. And it does not help the environment or anyone at all. There's no benefit to war at all. So that's all I have for the video. Goodbye.